Hey everybody, I'm Logan Alec. I'm a CPA. I own Choice Tax Relief. We help people who owe significant back taxes as well as people who have not filed their required tax returns for several years. We help them get back into compliance discreetly. And it's that second group of folks that I'm talking to in this video today, because the topic of today's video is IRS Notice CP59. I have one here on screen that I've redacted that one of our clients received. And the reason I'm talking about this notice today is because we are seeing the IRS send out this notice in droves. What is this notice? This is a notice that is informing a taxpayer that they have an unmet tax return filing obligation. In the case of this client, the CP59 was informing them that they need to file their 2020 Form 1040 individual income tax return that they did not file timely. And we are seeing the IRS send tens of thousands of these notices per week. We can't say we weren't warned because they told us. And earlier this year, and I made a video about it, that they are going to be sending out these CP59 notices in mass. And they told us about their campaign to send out 20 to 40,000 CP59 notices each week to high income filers. But let me tell you folks, we are seeing it not just for high income filers, we're seeing it for everybody across the income threshold. As I've said in other videos, the politically correct thing to say is that the IRS is only going after rich folks with incomes between 400,000 and a million between tax years 17 and 21. They're not going to go out and trumpet around all their internal initiatives to go after people who make less than that, who didn't file returns as well, because we're seeing these CP59s being sent out at all levels of income. And you got to be prepared. You got to know what you're looking at. That's why I'm making this video right here to basically talk about it. I'm going to go through this notice. It's a very short, brief notice. They've changed the look of this notice, and they've actually simplified it this year, 2024. They've done that with actually a few of the CP notices, but the CP59 has really been simplified. Interesting thing about it is it doesn't have the taxpayer's social on it. If you're used to looking at IRS notices or letters, you're used to seeing something in the box up here, kind of where my face is right now, and it's, it would say the taxpayer's name, the year, and their social security number. We don't see that here. It's interesting. It was kind of startling to me that that wasn't on there in an IRS notice. You have up here, you have the office that sent this notice to you. This particular taxpayer CP59 was sent from the IRS's campus in Austin. This, of course, is your mailing address here. I'm on it for this client because I'm one of the powers of attorney for this client. Here's the date of the notice right up here. And then here is obviously what the notice is trying to communicate to you, right? You need to file this year's tax return, okay? What you need to do immediately, file your tax return, right? And that is generally our advice as well in this situation for folks who've got a CP59. And we help these folks. We know how to file back tax returns, how to get the information, how to do it smart, sometimes how to maximize refunds and order the filing in the most beneficial way to the taxpayer. I've covered all this on my video on how to file back tax returns. Link to that video at the top of the screen. One thing to note here is no matter the year, they mention both options to file, electronically or by mail. But I just want to say that you can only file the last 3 years of taxes electronically, right? So right now, I'm recording this video in June 2024. That's 21, 22, and 23 you can file electronically, right? And it's kind of funny that they sent a notice in May about the 2020 tax year, still having the language about filing electronically, right? Because you haven't been able to file 2020 returns electronically since the end of 2023, right? But they still keep this boilerplate language in here. We've had clients ask about this because they're like, well, the notice says I could file my 2020 return electronically. You can't anymore. But they just keep the language in there, and of course they say may file electronically. right? Or you can file by mail, right? At this point, that's your only option for tax years 2020 and before. Um, Now, they do kind of have this caveat here. Did we make a mistake, right? Check whether you need to file. I, I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen a CP59 go to a taxpayer that didn't actually have a filing requirement for that year, right? These notices typically go out to folks who have, income reported on their wage and income transcript, have income reported to the IRS, especially on 1099s, but other tax forms as well, W-2s, K-1s, you name it, right? Usually the IRS is only going to expend the resources of opening a tax delinquency case for a year and sending out the CP59 for the year if there is some income there and the taxpayer likely has a filing requirement. So if you got this notice, you should probably assume that you have a filing requirement for this year. There's possibilities, though, that someone sent you an erroneous 1099 or an erroneous W-2 or an incorrect information on it. So, there's always that chance. But typically we see when people come to us with the CP59 in hand, it's when we check all their stuff, it's like, yeah, you actually have a filing requirement for this year. We got to file this return for you ASAP. But if you don't have a filing requirement, you can complete Form 15103, which you can download here. I'm not going to get into it here because this likely doesn't apply to the vast majority of people watching this. But you can download that form, fill it out, say why you don't actually have a filing requirement for the year in question here, and then you can either mail that form or fax it to the IRS. So here is what happens if the IRS doesn't hear from you, okay? And you don't either file your return or use Form 15103 to say why you do not have a filing requirement for the year. Now, this list is obviously not exhaustive, okay? There are many more consequences to not filing your required tax returns and not being in tax filing compliance that go beyond this list. I've covered some of these consequences in another video. Link to that video at the top of the screen, right? But for the sake of this video and going over the CP59 notice, here are the three consequences the IRS gives you if you don't get in shape quickly with respect to this tax year. You may lose your claim to a refund or certain credits. Well, what does this mean? You have 3 years from the date that the IRS, or 3 years from the due date of a return, including extensions, if you got an extension for the year, to file a return to get a refund for that year. Okay? So for 2020 right now, if you didn't file a refund for 2020, you didn't file an extension for 2020, you can't get a refund for 2020 anymore. If you did file an extension, you can still get a refund for 2020 all the way up until October 15th of this year, 2024, right? So that's what that's saying, right? If you go long enough, even if the IRS technically would owe you money on that return, you get a refund. If you go beyond that 3-year time limit, that's called the refund statute of limitations, right? And just like the IRS has a 10-year collection statute of limitations, the refund statute of limitations is generally 3 years, right? So collection statute, expiration date, CSED, you've heard me talk about that in other videos. Refund statute expiration date, RSED, that's another legal concept here when we're talking about IRS taxes and refunds and things like that. Second consequence, if you don't fix this, we may determine your tax for you. If you've been on this channel any length of time, you know that I talk about this a lot. What is this? This is the IRS substitute for return process. The IRS has the legal right to file what's called a substitute for return for you based on information that it has received from third parties, 1099s, W-2s, K-1s, assess tax based on that SFR, which is not favorable to you at all. It does not give you any business deductions against your 1099 income. These SFRs don't let you take itemized deductions. They force you into the standard deduction. They don't give you credit for any dependents. If you are single, they assume your filing status is single, or if they think you're single, they assume your filing status is single as opposed to head of household. If they believe you're married, they assume married filing separately instead of married filing jointly. So they really stick it to you with these SFRs. I made a whole video about IRS SFR program. Link to that video at the top of the screen. So that's one consequence that could come of this, right? And then they could, assess the tax based on this and then send you to collections to get money from you from essentially this fake tax return that the IRS just prepared based on your gross income. And finally, you may be subject to backup withholding, right? If you ever fill out a W-9, there's that question on there. Hey, are you subject to backup withholding? Basically, this is when the IRS informs you that, well, you're subject to backup withholding, and any interest income or dividend income you receive, like from banks or brokerages, is subject to withholding in a way that it usually isn't. All right, next page. It tells you how to make a payment. This stuff is pretty basic. I'm not going to get into it here, but you can make a payment at irs.gov/payments. There's a variety of options to pay there. And you can also, of course, make, paper payments in the mail. Kind of funny they bring this up because, if you haven't filed your 2020 return, or you haven't prepared it, how do you even know what you're going to owe in the first place, right? But I guess they're preemptively kind of want you to get in the mindset that, okay, I gotta pay what's owed on this return. I gotta pay what's owed on this return, right? To kind of already get you in that mindset, because the whole point of this is not just for you to file the return, but it's for you to file the return and then pay them what you owe on that return as well, with penalties and interest. And yes, because this is a return that was not filed timely, not only is there the interest compounded daily, not only is the failure to pay penalty, but there's also the failure to file penalty, which by this time would have already maxed out at 25%, less the amount of any failure to pay penalty that was running concurrently with the in any given month. And that's probably going off the deep end here. But yeah, you're going to be looking at some penalties and interest here for filing a return late, assuming you have a balance due on the return. If there's no balance due on the return, no failure to pay penalty, no failure to file penalty, no interest. Or anything like that. You might still have an underpayment of estimated tax penalty, but that's typically a bit smaller. Yeah. Okay. So this little box here, where to find more information. This is just kind of general information about, it's boilerplate stuff they put on almost every notice. So I'm not going to really get into it. It's like, here's the official IRS webpage for this notice. Here's where you get your transcript. So, not really going to get into it. Cover the notice part by part. You can see that's the end here. What I want to talk about now is what to do if you get this notice. Okay, what to do if you get this notice. First and foremost, understand that you will get one CP59 for each year that you have outstanding that the IRS wants a return from you for. Okay? Now, the IRS is not sending out CP59s if you forgot to file your return back in 1999. Okay, they are not going back that far. And if you go to anybody, any tax professional, and you tell them, hey, man, I got this CP59 for 2020, and they're like, well, when was the last time you filed a tax return? And you're like, oh, maybe 2010. They're like, oh, wow, we got to go all the way back to 2011 and file all those returns and get you in compliance. Might not be a good idea. IRS's policy, I've covered this in several videos, is to only look at the last 6 years of returns when it comes to considering you in filing compliance and able to enter into a resolution with the IRS. Now, with approval from their boss, managerial approval it's called, an IRS employee could demand more than the last 6 years. We see this routinely when a non-filer client of ours has been assigned to a revenue officer to work the case. The revenue officer will often get managerial approval to request tax returns beyond the 6 years for us to prepare and file for the taxpayer. Okay, but in general, you're good with just find the last 6 years. That's current IRS policy. That is not law. Theoretically, that law could change in the future, so I suppose there is some risk in relying on that IRS policy, that particular policy statement, but that is the position that most of our clients take when it comes to this, right? Because finding all those older years, let's say you go back to 2011, man, that could really create a lot more tax liability, a lot more penalties and interest, right? Than if you just worked on the last 6 years. Now the IRS considers you in filing compliance and then get into some kind of payment plan or other resolution, hardship-based resolutions if you qualify for it, offering compromise, partial payment installment agreement, CNC, something, right? If you qualify for those things based on your financial situation and wherewithal to pay. So, and I've covered this in other videos more, but I guess what I'm saying is when you get this notice, you want to figure out, like if you haven't filed since 2020, right? You haven't filed 20, 21, 22. You may have only gotten the notice for 2020, but rest assured, eventually the IRS is going to want 21 and 22 as well. They just haven't sent out the notice yet, potentially, right? I think we have seen some for 2021. But what I'm saying is you want to develop a game plan here, right? An educated game plan based on your knowledge of IRS policies and procedures, as well as the underlying tax law, okay? Develop a game plan for which years you need to file, the order in which you're going to file them, and how you're going to obtain the information that you need to file these returns, okay? All that I have covered in my wonderful video called How to File Back Tax Returns. And you can check out that video here at the top left-hand side of the screen. It's an oldie but a goodie. I also have all my videos on unfiled tax returns in this playlist here at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you need help with your CP59, reach out to us at Choice Tax Relief. ChoiceTaxRelief.com, fill out the form, we'll reach out to you, or give us a call at 866-8000-TAX. All right, folks, thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video.